because we have a couple, we at least have one new person sitting at the table, why don't we go around and first and everybody introduce yourselves. Start with you, Andy.
Yes, Andy Mellon, Chief Innovation Officer for the Department of Education.
I'm Gail Zinnerlis with the Indiana State Teachers Association, and I'm proud to say I got here on time.
Yes.
Small thing.
Yeah, John Alsess with the Indiana Non-Public Education Association.
Representative Bob Baining, House Education Chair.
Katie General with Governor Holcomb's office.
Teresa Lovers, Commission for Higher Education.
Ken Sauer, Commission for Higher Education Staff.
Terry Lambert, Commissioner for Higher Education Staff.
Nicole Schenkel, Vincent University Early College.
Mike Means, Indiana University.
Norm Hayes, Ivy Tech Community College, Director of 14 Transitions.
Mary Ellen Hamer, Independent Colleges of Indiana.
I am not Alicia Johnson. My name is David Dressler, and I know about half the people in the room, which is fun. I am substituting for Alicia today, and thank you for allowing me to do so. She was unable to be here, and because of that, asked me to substitute for her because dual credit is very important to her and to IPS as we're reinventing high schools. And so I've been working with Alicia for the past 4 years, and I'm happy to be here today.
I would say it's a little important to you in your career as well.
Well, you and I, Jen, you remember this, did dual credit 10 years ago. So, and as I read the report, some things have changed, some things have not. So,
Janet, we've been introducing ourselves, we just passed you by, so.
Okay.
No, you didn't introduce. Okay.
Janet Royal as Executive Director at SEL at the University of Illinois.
Senator?
Senator Jeff Watts, Chairman of the Senate Education Committee.
Tom Edmonton, Superintendent of Wallace.
Tom, I feel like you're there. I'm thinking we need to move you in a little bit. Are you comfortable where you are, or would you like to move over here? Okay.
As a former school administrator, my back is to the wall. see the room.
Well, there are some of us who have spent many hours in this room. And so it's good to have those back with us again to continue really the important work about providing great opportunities for Hoosier students. We've been doing good work with this group, I think. It's not going to be something that we complete today. We know that this is going to be work that continues, and much of what we're making in the area of recommendations will really need the continued good effort of this group. Among the other things that we'll consider is there a way to consider having this group continue? We're meeting the very specific charge of the legislature, which was to look at the preparation of dual credit teachers, especially in light of the HLC 2022 deadline. But there are so many other issues associated with dual credit and early college and opportunities for students and the transitions from high school to college that, you know, we hope that this good work will continue. But we do have a deadline of making a report by November 1st, am I correct?
Yes.
November 1st, and so we will talk about doing that today. I don't believe there'll be anything that's really new in today's discussion. It's more a matter of getting consensus around this being an agenda that we feel comfortable moving forward. Before we begin with the agenda, does anybody have any comments they'd like to make or anything to provide context for today's discussion? If not, we will begin, and we're going to turn first to Janet. We have often been doing this, and there's some good news, and she's going to be reporting on that I think actually will help us address issues of providing dual credit teachers, especially for students who live in rural Indiana. And this is a real exciting and a new grant opportunity. Not opportunity, it's been realized actually, and now they have to do the hard work. So Janet, with that, we look forward to hearing about the Rural Early College Network.
Thank you so much. A few weeks ago, SEL was excited to receive word that we received a $7.9 million federal Education Innovation and Research Grant, and it's for something called the Rural Early College Network. And Teresa and Ken asked me to give you an overview today of this. So this little graphic does a nice job of showing how this will roll out. We are starting year one right now, and we will have 5 mentor early colleges, which are schools that have already been endorsed early colleges, paired with 5 other mentee rural high schools. And these are schools that have gone through our training because we had to identify the names of these schools. So those 10 are going to launch this year as a small network. In year 2, 5 more mentee schools or unendorsed schools will begin the process. And in year 3, we add another 5 for a total of 20 schools that will be involved in the project. The first 2 years, all the schools are identified. The last year, we will do an application process for those 5 particular schools. Years 4 and 5, we will continue our training with the schools, and they are all to be trying to achieve endorsement by the end of the period, if not sooner. We hope it happens much sooner than 5 years for these folks.
Karen, are these schools or school districts?
Schools, high schools. The goals of, we're calling this RECON for the Rural Early College Network. 3 main goals. One is to increase college readiness and post-secondary acceptance. Career readiness and opportunities will be increased as a result, as well as building some efficiencies for the schools within the network for doing dual credit in early college. We had to create a logic model as part of our proposal, so if we start on the left-hand side under program activities, you'll see that the schools will all receive support in forms of professional development and coaching. They will be mentored, so mentor schools, the ones that are endorsed, will be working with 1 school, then 2 schools, then 3 schools to help them in their endorsement process. Dual credit teacher credentialing is a major part of this in terms of providing incentive and funding to help teachers achieve that credentialing. We are also encouraging the career pathways and work-based learning to occur in this. And so we've got the governor's workforce ethics certificate is built into this as well. And please excuse me, I'm getting over a terrible cold and we can't always talk very well. So those are pieces of the school support. As a network, and again, 10 schools, 15 and 20, they will meet periodically as a whole group. Sometimes the mentor schools will meet just together. Sometimes what we're calling the Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 schools will meet together. All of those mentor schools will also receive support because we feel like even though they aren't endorsed, there's things that they can continue to improve. So we hope that they take this opportunity to do even greater things within their schools. All will be coached on achieving endorsement. We'll help them facilitate partnerships with business and industry in their areas, and we hope together we can advocate for some policy in terms of rural schools as well as early college. We have 8 different core principles that are our mediating factors. Those are all listed there. And then we are also looking at some ways to sustain early college and rural schools. So we hope to disseminate best practices that we derive from this study. We will accelerate the early college endorsement process. We think we can take it from 4 to 5 years to 2 to 3 years through this. We will form the network itself of these 20 schools, but we'll also form a collaborative for rural education, which is for rural schools in general, rural school districts. And of course, we will enhance the existing early college implementation in all these schools, and then we'll help them develop sustainability plans. The outcomes are listed for you on the far right, but we are to also promote some sustainability and scale outcomes. So the idea is that we will have more endorsed early colleges in Indiana as a result of this. We hope to have 15 more, and then more teachers will be credentialed to be dual credit instructors. Questions for me on that? There's more. Okay. These are the schools that are involved in the first 2 years. But those in red, or excuse me, those in blue on the left are the mentor schools, and Jason Callahan represents one of those. Wabash High School will be one of the mentors. And each of those will work with 3 schools as stated before, and they have not seen who their mentees are yet, so this is secret, don't tell them this yet. But these are the schools they'll be paired with to be working. And all of them had to reside in one of the federal rural locale codes. And so some schools that we thought would be rural were not according to that federal code. So it's kind of surprising. For instance, we didn't think that Sens would be, but they are. They're considered because they've taken so much rural area around the town. This is just a real quick map to look at where they're located right now, with the blue ones being the mentor schools, the red boxes being the year 1 schools, and the triangles, green triangles are year 2. And you don't know where your year 3 will be from, so we hope some of those blank areas in there will be filled in with some of those. This is the funding each of the schools receive, so the mentors build up in their funding per year because their responsibilities increase up through year 3, and then they taper back down. The Tier 1 schools start high and taper down, and again, we're trying to prove sustainability, that they will keep going with this without it. And so those that come on in Tier 3 will get the least amount, but still it's a nice boost for schools in terms of their work. And that gives you the total there at the bottom. This is how the funding breaks out for individual schools. They will have to submit to us to sell a proposal of how they want to spend their money each year. So I'd like to start on the right-hand side. We designated that 40% of their allotment would go to teacher credentialing. And so that's to help with tuition or incentives that a school district might want to say. But then we also said you may have another 10% for professional development in general. So if they want to use that other 10% still toward teacher credentialing, they can, or if they want to do some other kind of professional development, they may. Then up around the top, 10% for travel expenses, because we will be going around the state visiting each other's schools, and we are also expecting each school to go to a national conference each year. We'll either be going to the National Rural Education Forum, the College for All Conference, and there might be another one we come up with, but those are 2 that we're looking at. And then last, the school gets to create their individual proposal in terms of their needs. So for instance, some of them might need more supports for literacy and math. Students who are not passing the AccuPlacer perhaps need some tutoring for that, or need My Foundation software. It can also go toward ambiance, it can go toward AccuPlacer testing costs, project-based learning, training, any kind of supports. It cannot go for personnel, and it cannot go for significant equipment. But those are the kinds of things that are listed there. Many of our schools, we request that they send kids on college visits every year, 9th grade on, but transportation can be a barrier in terms of cost for that. So this is something that they can take out of this fund here. So those are how the funds will be used. And last, we are working with an external evaluator from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Eric Griebing is going to work with us, and the SERV Center there at the university has received a number of federal grants in the past, and a number of them have had to do with early college, so they seem like perfect people to have us work with. So that's it in a nutshell.
Any questions? I reckon this is a good idea.
I reckon it is. we could get about that quite a bit, so, yeah.
Congratulations.
Teresa, I have an editorial comment because I know Janet so well. She has spent hundreds of hours writing federal grants and has been so persistent. And so congratulations on winning this huge grant, which will make a difference for Indiana. It's clear that she's the very best cell executive director. and I want to congratulate her on that.
Well, we all do. That's great news. All right, with that, we're going to turn to Terry. As you know, we've been trying to keep track of where we are on our chart for teacher credentialing, and we promised at this meeting that we can give you an update, and that's what Terry is going to do.
We do. We have lots of data. I know some of it was already broken down in your recommendations, and I just wanted to go over some of the high points and some of the trends, because I think that's really what we're all looking at. That's why we wanted to share with you all 4 of the different versions that we've had of this document. And I will make one side comment that when this was discussed at NASA, the National Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships last week in a state meeting. Someone mentioned that we did this work, and the other state compacts all looked and said, "You've got to be kidding. No one else is doing this," which I thought was really interesting, that their states don't seem to be, looking at exactly where our teachers stand. So lots of work that's put in by our coordinators. Thank you all so much for that. As we look at the trends, we can see that we are trending in that green area in the right direction, the direction that we wanted to. We've gone up almost 43%. So, to kind of chunk it out, the teachers with masters in 18 hours increased to 7.7, and in the discipline 4.7. And we're seeing a little bump in tested experience. There was 1% more. So just a tiny bit, but I thought that was kind of interesting. As we look at the kind of that second section from C to F, the masters outside the discipline but needing the 18 hours, we're seeing some movement. The teachers did decrease that had, without the 18 hours. That's logical because they're moving over towards fully being credentialed. So we'd like to see that. But when you look at the ones that really only are going to need 2 or 4 courses, that's a smaller number. So really, we hope that this means that they should be completely qualified by academic year 20, 21, and 22 if they stay on track. So those are some positive trends. It's also interesting as we look at the teachers without the masters, they're not really decreasing. They only decreased by 2%, so almost unchanged. And our total number of dual credit teachers increased by 9.3%. Now we know some of that was having a more robust representation of the teachers in this time because we now have fully all of the MinSins. And I think there was a note made about that prior to these versions, we did not have all of the MinSins teachers. We didn't have all of the early college teachers represented, which we do now. So this is probably our most accurate view of exactly where we stand with every teacher being counted. So, again, there still is enough of an increase that we are seeing more dual credit teachers teaching because of the demand. We thought we'd do something fun and kind of divide it out. Because of the STEM teacher recruitment grant, we know that that's helped move some of our teachers forward, but truly only 40% of our dual credit teachers are in the STEM disciplines. We still have the bulk. The 60% are in what are considered non-STEM. And so that we felt was, again, something that needed to be addressed. Also, we thought, well, how much of this is really impacted by our independent colleges, which are offering some dual credit? But when we took that out, it's really only 93% still of the public colleges and universities. So the independent colleges, there's still a rather small percent that are offering dual credit and that are under the umbrella. Of course, we've got to remember the HLC umbrella for extension. So we thought that was still kind of interesting. And as you dig that one out, and really just say, okay, let's look at what the state institutions, they're the teachers that are partnering with the state institutions. Of our total of 3,000, I should know these numbers by heart, shouldn't I? 3,019, as I was working on this document, it was 3,016 for a while, and I couldn't find those last teachers. So of those, we do have 2,818 that are teaching and partnering with the public institutions. So at that point, again, the numbers are not that much different. They're at 44.3 exactly, very, very close to the full amount of 44.8. The masters outside is almost exact, and no masters, again, very similar. So even dividing the data out in little different ways, we're still seeing this is probably the best picture of where we are and with some of the challenges that we still have ahead of us to try to get more teachers credentialed and find ways, especially to help teachers that are in those non-STEM disciplines to get graduate level coursework, because we are seeing a shift in the STEM, but not as much in the non-STEM areas. So, any questions?
Questions for Terry? Look at those numbers for a minute. Any surprises for any of you, or? Yes?
I have a question. I should totally know the answer to this, so I apologize. The numbers in each category are not unduplicated individual teachers. These are an aggregate of all the teachers numbers aggregated by reporting
This
dual
is-
credit providers, is that
And,
correct?
and as you know, these are reported by the institutions, so very possibly you could have a teacher teaching for IU's ACP,
Sure.
while you could have a teacher teaching for Ivy Tech and one for Vincennes. So without getting into the actual specific names of the teachers and all of that information, that's where we are on this.
Well, I asked because I can remember. And then B, I'm really glad for the clarification that we have included in this last round, all of Vincent's votes, which
Yes.
is great. That's great. The part that really sparked my question had to do with so if we back add those Vincent's teachers to 2015, 16 or so, then we really haven't grown the number of dual credit teachers
We've
too
grown,
much.
we've grown them a little bit, but not nearly as much as what it might look like just from those numbers.
Right, so what's interesting to me is I know over that period of time, the IE program has trained about 600 teachers between 16 and 19. So we've added 600 teachers to, in our world, our rank. So either it's saying something about the attrition we're having with dual credit teachers, I don't suggest 600 would mean we'd have 600 more. There's either an attrition issue, or there's a more duplication across the programs. I don't really know which one it is, but I would love for us to ask our partners tomorrow when we meet statewide.
And what we're hearing is we're hearing that high schools are partnering with more and more institutions. It used to be that high school would say, well, Ivy Tech's my primary partner and we're doing some ACP, or Vincennes is my primary partner and we're patching some Ivy Tech courses. Now, what we're hearing and what I'm learning from the council workshops when I ask this question, and I'm saying, are you partnering with more than 2 or 3 post-secondary partners? And almost every hand goes up. And then the next question is it because of teacher credentialing? And then they say yes. So we are seeing, and that is, I guess, something, again, nationally, that is not that unique. But it does then bring in additional challenges of trying to juggle that many post-secondary partners, and then it also gets into the cost of transcripts. It's hard enough to get students to ask and request a transcript from 1 provider or 2 providers, but when you start looking at 4 or 5 and keeping all of that straight to send for applications, that gets very, very challenging. So I think that we see some interesting dynamics of how things are changing, and much of it has been because of teacher credentialing challenges.
Right, and I agree, and I'm just imagining this, Ivy Tech and Vincennes, I can imagine Ivy Tech's brought in hundreds of new teachers in this amount of time as well, and Vincennes was like, for me, I'd really like to get a sense of if we have an attrition, I'd like just to really kind of get a sense of what that attrition rate really is. So as we, Gail mentioned last time we met, some focused energies around credentialing. So are we focusing some monies or energies around individual teachers is the right thing to do, especially if it now makes one teacher eligible to help multiple programs. But that's a really great bang for our buck. But I think we need to get a sense of the attrition rate that I don't know that we ever answered.
And is that something that you could provide as a dual credit coordinator or over that program? Is that something, I guess if that's what we need to throw that out. We do have a meeting of this smaller group tomorrow to talk about issues like that.
I am happy to ask the group tomorrow.
Well, I think that's a really important point.
I think
because
that's
we could be doing all this work, and if we're losing people as fast as we're preparing them, we're not sustaining the core.
Exactly, and I think that that's been something that has been addressed is at what point do you say to a teacher, we're not going to subsidize getting you credentialed if you're going to retire or leave the state, and that's been kicked around quite a bit. So, but I think attrition is one of the things we talked about from the start that we were going to see. Teachers with masters are retiring.
Andy, I know you said you needed to leave early. Are you okay with the recommendations?
Yeah,
Okay, just wanted to-
perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to have to leave.
No, that's okay. Any other questions for Terry?
I'd like to make just a comment or two. First of all, following David's lead, I'd like to say that Terry has devoted hundreds of hours to this over the past 4 years. When we first did this, when the commission submitted the application on behalf of 22 public and private nonprofit institutions, there was an enormous amount of data that were collected, and Terry has been on top of that all 4 years, and I hope for some additional years going forward. You've done a great job.
It's too much fun to give up, Ken.
I would also compliment the institutions that put an awful lot of effort into taking careful stock of the qualifications of the teachers who are teaching on their behalf. So I want to acknowledge their effort in all of this. And I do have a sense of the national scope here, and indeed, I think we have a much better handle on faculty qualifications than probably any other state. And obviously, we didn't have this handle before, so in that sense, the HLC at least provided us with an incentive to collect some data and carefully look at the qualifications that teachers have. My final comment, and this, I guess, goes along with the questions that Mike has raised in terms of duplication and attrition, that will involve some additional data collection on the part of the institutions. I think it's a good thing to do, and I suspect we all think that's a good thing to do, and would hope that we could craft a good approach to get answers to the questions that have been raised, but do acknowledge that will require some additional analysis and effort on the part of the institution. So I guess we've got a good handle, but a lot of work into that.
Okay, let's move on then. We're going to move to additional information on the strategies for providing the credentialed dual credit teachers, and I'm going to turn to Scott Bogan. Actually, Scott's not here.
Scott's not here.
I thought I did.
He said he had a meeting that would last until 1:30. So we're very close to that. He had thought maybe that the discussion of the earlier...
Would it be appropriate to move to the draft recommendations and then come back to that?
Sure.
So if you would like him to participate. This is the bulk of what we really want to do today is the document that we sent out to you, which has the draft recommendations. So with that, Ken, I know that people had a chance to see it, but I think we probably need to provide some more context and background and give people a chance to respond to your recommendations.
Yes, absolutely, and I'd be happy to very quickly go through these, and certainly not in detail, but just sort of at a high level. So the first recommendation really tees off the data that Terry just reviewed. By the way, Scott has just here. Do we want to?
Yeah, well, we just were starting. So we were going to go on to the recommendations if you weren't here, but I think we'll turn over to you and actually let you spend a little time talking about some of the work that you're doing in terms of strategies for providing and some of the information that you have.
Sure, absolutely.
And we had actually talked about going through some additional strategies, but there is a recommendation to that effect. And given the fact that the National Board certification is a fairly complex topic, Scott, Terry, and I had a chance to spend some time on that last week, and there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered.
Sure.
But this is a big topic.
And I would recommend, if you would, please, to provide the information today, especially to Representative Porter, because he raised this issue in the last meeting. Since he's not here today, it'd be helpful for him to receive that too.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you for this opportunity to meet with you this afternoon. My name is Scott Bogan. I'm the Director of Higher Education and Ed Prep Programs at the Indiana Department of Education. And just a quick background on National Board certification. First of all, it is not required in the state of Indiana, as most of you probably know that already. But it is a very rigorous process by which an individual who is currently licensed in the state of Indiana, who has held the license, a valid license for at least 3 years and obviously holds a bachelor's degree, may apply for National Board certification. It is a very rigorous process. In fact, many say that it's even more rigorous than earning a master's degree. not only because of the content focus within certification, but also because an individual who earns this certificate has to renew it every 5 years. Prior to 2017, an individual who received National Board certification was certified for 10 years, now it's only 5 years. So it is very rigorous. It requires candidates to complete an assessment in a content area via a test that is taken at a national testing center, and then there are 3 portfolio assessments which an individual must complete in order to demonstrate that they meet the criteria for National Board certification in the classroom. So currently in the state of Indiana, we have 203 who are certified, which is very low, actually, compared to some of our neighboring states. And currently there are 70 candidates applying for National Board certification. In Indiana, one of the incentives for becoming nationally board certified is the fact that someone can convert a 5-year license into a 10-year accomplished practitioner license without holding a master's degree. Otherwise, an individual must hold a master's degree in order to convert their license. Some studies have shown and research has shown that those who are nationally board certified not only are meeting rigorous content preparation specific to their discipline, but are also making a positive impact on student achievement in the classroom. So again, it's an option. It's not something that we, are saying every teacher must do, but it is a rigorous process that may be worth considering as an option for not only our current teachers, but also those teaching at post-secondary or as adjuncts or even dual credit setting. So with that, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for your presentation, Scott.
Absolutely.
A couple of questions.
Sure.
National Board certification, obviously HLC doesn't recognize that. It has to be master's level plus in that 18 content hours semester. You say that the data is clear that a National Board certified teacher actually has a positive impact on student performance data. Can you just at some point give me that data?
Yeah, actually, I have a link that I can provide you, and I have to be honest with you, it's data that's provided by the National Board. So, we have to keep that in mind, that the research that's out there may be primarily collected by them, but I would be happy to share that.
Yeah, because I've even talked to them on a national level and asked them to provide some of that third-party evaluation
Sure.
data, and it's been kind of tough to find, at least get them to refer that to me, so I would be very interested.
Yes, definitely can do that. And I know a few other organizations, such as the National Association for Teacher Quality, they're looking into some of this data, but I don't know if they have data to share at this point, but I'll definitely look into that, share it with you.
Do you have any theories why Indiana has a low percentage of people participating? Are there incentives in other states financially, or what's going on in other states that encourage more people?
I'm guessing at this point, but my guess would be that most other states are providing some financial incentive for becoming nationally board certified. We do not mandate that, obviously, in Indiana, but some of our local school districts may provide an incentive for doing that. But we do not, at this point, have a statewide incentive for becoming national board certified, other than
the top 5 school districts, do you think they're all providing financial incentives? Do you know?
I would guess that they are, and I could find out.
Anybody else around the table know anything about financial incentives provided for this?
I don't have this data either, but it's tied. Our low numbers are tied to the fact that, as I say, we don't recognize it in terms of reward or incentive to do it in terms of financial incentive. I know our association, we have a division that deals with, kind of professional development, broadest sense of the word, and they've gone up to Fort Wayne, I it's on a small scale, it just is. And it's just a policy decision.
So through HLC accreditation, there's no benefit given to a school or credit if they have nationally board certified teachers?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah, I think while this is something that HLC hasn't explicitly spoken to, I think if there were to be a case to make for somebody who does not meet the HLC qualifications, but who is board certified, I think that could, to be the case to make, would be made under the tested experience criterion that HLC does permit. They have opened the door a little bit for that, and I think HLC has been afraid that that would be used in a sort of cavalier mode, sort of just be used, well, okay, you don't have the qualifications, so we'll make sure you're qualified this way. In fact, they have, a couple of states have tried to use it very widely, but HLC has pushed back against that. On the other hand, national certification is a rigorous program. And granted, we haven't seen, we may not have all the data, but at least there's some data that would suggest that it can provide a very effective means for a teacher teaching dual credit successfully. But I think, at least to me, it would seem institutions would be on safer ground if they, on safe ground, if they could say we're using this very rigorous national certification as a way to apply tested experience. And now, whether HLC should be engaged on that is another question.
The other interesting question is how many of our current 200 or so are even in a situation where they're teaching dual credit? How many are elementary, middle school? So do you know how many of the 200 are high school teachers?
The majority I know are high school teachers.
Okay.
I know that I don't have a specific figure, but I could definitely get it.
Would there be any way for us to find out how many are teaching dual credit?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay. I mean, it's obviously still a small number at this point, so it's not so much the recognition of those who currently are as a pathway for others for the future.
I think the question too is how many are teaching high school but aren't in that upper left, that left column, because they're already qualified somehow. So it's who are we capturing
Right.
that close.
Yeah, they're really helping to close the gap at that point. But the discussion of whether or not it would be recognized as a pathway.
And especially with our time is running, the clock is running on that deadline to meet those extra criteria. So I think it's definitely worth looking into.
So it does bring up the bigger discussion that, is part of the discussion with you, the broader discussion of some have raised the discussion point around the table of whether we should have another go at HLC on any of these issues. We've been, to this point, unsuccessful, and I don't think there's any reason for us to believe we're going to move them away from what their position is. It's a matter of can we get them to acknowledge that position in new ways that they've done in the past,
Right.
which this might be one. And we all recall that when Sue Ellsworth was Lieutenant Governor, she went with Ken and met with HLC, and we're still where we are today. So,
one extension was successful.
pardon?
I said one of the extensions was successful.
The 2022 extension,
Yeah.
we got the
Yeah,
extension.
be nice if you could
Yeah,
get
so that
one
was
more.
the important thing, so. Any other answers, Scott? Yes, Senator?
Yes.
Has any higher education ever looked at teachers that are national board certified and can maybe apply some credits for that towards a higher ed degree?
Not for higher ed
For a master's,
credit.
as we look at need for master's level?
I personally am not aware of any, but if the level of rigor for this particular program is equivalent or even exceeds that of a master's, it would be up to the institution to decide whether they would accept that as what they typically call life experience, which is what this would be, because it's obviously not leading to graduate credit. But institutions have that flexibility to award that. That would be an institutional decision.
I think that's a great
It's something
point, Senator.
to recommend.
I think actually as we think about this, this is in keeping with the whole concept of prior learning assessments and acknowledging what people have learned, and if some of our institutions in the room can think about a way to do that, it can certainly help us. Can you give credit for some of what people have learned through the National Board Certification that gets them farther down the path?
I will say that those who have gone through it, whether they're even successful or not, have said it has been the absolute best process they've ever gone through in terms of their own professional growth. Yes. So unsolicited testimonial, but and certainly not scientific, but if they rate it well.
Hearing what Gail said, do we have any idea how many actually try and how many actually are board certified?
Board certified, well, right now we currently have 70 that have applied. I don't have a percentage of, attrition and so forth, but that would be something I could be happy to investigate.
Based on her comments, if they've tried it and didn't make it.
Yeah, right.
And the process has changed.
And with being so rigorous, we probably had quite a few, but I could.
When it first came on, it was one set of things that required, I think, 3 or 4 years of work. I think, and I'm not the expert in our company, but I think they've been able to collapse some of the things to make it a bit more doable in terms, not necessarily rigor, but time commitment. But I could talk to our professional development expert, and she talked for some days about it.
It'd be interesting to know.
But it did make one fundamental change in these last however many years.
And the renewal, how many are renewing it? Because the renewal process is much more rigorous now than it was. It may be too early at this point to know that percentage, but.
Can you give us an idea what the cost for application is?
Yeah, they have a price, they have a fee, and it's based on, there's an application fee, and then you pay for each of the assessments and the portfolios as you go through the process. And I believe it is $450 for the application fee. I don't have the document in front of me, but they have it on their website where they show the different fees that you pay as you move forward. A few years ago, there was a grant that was offered by the department where some schools were able to apply for funding to help cover the application fee, but I'm not for sure if those fees have changed since that was offered. But that it isn't cheap, I do know that. But there is a fee. I don't know if you're aware of the fee. It's on their website, but I could definitely send you that link.
I think when the DOE was offering the grant assistance, that's when we were able to go and partner with the department to bring in some NEA resources to the districts and that kind of thing. Kind of together.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was just a 1-year deal. So, but I'll get the fee schedule to you as well.
Jason or Tom, do either one of you know, are any of your school teachers involved in the National Board Certification?
We don't. And I would echo what Gail said earlier, there's no incentive at this point for it, so.
Okay, well, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And
I asked one
Oh,
question, and this is at this point prior to learning assessment. Scott, are you able to provide any additional detail about the 3 portfolios?
Yes.
How extensive they are?
yes, there are. There's a content assessment, and there are 3 portfolios in which they must demonstrate a specific level of instructional ability or pedagogical practice within the classroom. And they can be completed in any order in order to be completed. And they're focused on what they call core propositions that are part of the program. And one of them has to do with classroom management, classroom instruction, managing and monitoring student learning, and how to improve upon instructional practice based on not only their experience but also in student growth data. So it has a component about how to analyze student data to improve and modify instruction, and that's a huge need. And I will throw this out as something for you to think about. We are not an EdTPA state. I don't know if you've heard of EdTPA or not, but it's closely aligned to some of the structure of this, so there could be a good connection between what pre-service teachers are learning through EdTPA and what they could then carry on through national board certification. Just something to think about.
Can I listen? Scott, I think it's interesting that you have the top 5 school districts, well actually we got 6 that have them, but I mean 12 in the school city of Hammond, 12 in Tiffany. There has to be a reason that, I mean that's a pretty significant number.
Right.
I would assume. Can you maybe look into and ask,
Sure.
contact these school districts?
Absolutely.
To see why so many have located in those, and we have 2 districts here that have none.
Right.
And there's got to be something playing, I don't know.
Okay.
I gotta imagine there's some kind of incentive or some kind of.
Yeah, but the
It's probably a local, but it'd be nice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's nice to know what that is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been very helpful. Appreciate it.
Okay. Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's turn now to the recommendations. As you know, there's some introductory context provided here with background. I don't think Ken, it's necessary for us to go through that so much, so I think we can just turn, and then we provided information about where we are up to this point. And so I think actually we probably want to turn to the recommendations themselves, which start on page, it's not a numbered page.
It's right after the narrative.
Yes, yeah, so start with recommendation. So let's spend our time the rest of the meeting on this.
And there are 11, I'm sorry? There are 11 of them, and the first one simply says that in light of the data that we reviewed, Indiana is going to have to develop some new or modified strategies if we are to keep delivering the level of dual credit instruction that we currently are. Recommendation 2 deals with identifying and assessing best practices, and there are some specific strategies for doing that are articulated in items A through F. So sharing fully credentialed teachers across state district lines, recruiting retired teachers, utilizing college faculty on loan, developing model criteria to encourage institutions to apply tested experience. This is actually just what we were talking about in terms of the National Board certification. Employing competency-based models and prior learning assessment for teachers to get graduate credit. And then finally providing district financial incentives. So those are some specific strategies. There are a couple of other thoughts about how to get some additional suggestions. One of those, and I know Katie has talked a lot about this, surveying district superintendents in at least a systematic way, and participating in regional and national forums. NAC, the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, does have an advisory group on this topic, and they can be a source of additional ideas. Item 3 talks about the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, as we just discussed with Scott. Item 4 deals with new delivery models, and here the thought might be to explore blended delivery models that would utilize some combination of campus faculty, online instruction, and that may be synchronous or asynchronous, and classroom teachers who might serve as mentors. Recommendations 5 and 6 deal with financial models. So one might deal with modifying the funding of dual credit, or really dual enrollment now, which would involve high school students coming to the college campus that currently isn't covered by our funding model, and at least potentially for areas perhaps in rural parts of the state, for example, in which it's very hard to find qualified teachers. Item 6 deals specifically with the next level teacher program, to extend that to provide support for a student completing their master's degree, so that when they began their teaching career, they would already be qualified to teach dual credit courses. Item 7 is sort of another variation of new teacher education models. This would be promoting kind of 4+1 to finish the baccalaureate and the master's, and residency approaches that have been tried in a couple of areas. Items 8, 9, and 10 all deal with communication and training. So item 8 recommends improving the statewide messaging about the rigor, value, and benefits of dual credit. We think that we could make for some improvements in this area. Item 9 deals with working with college administrators, admissions officers, for example, and academic leaders, and communicating to them and making sure that they are providing the messaging about the value of dual credit. And then item 10 suggests developing a toolbox that school administrators could utilize in the local setting. And item 11 suggests that the work of the Dual Credit Advisory Council continue through the extension period that HLC has granted, and that ends on September 1st, 2022. If the council was in favor of that recommendation, you have to think of the frequency being quarterly, for example. And then, Katie, you may have some additional thoughts here on perhaps another recommendation, which I think extends a little bit one of the recommendations that was included here earlier.
Sure. I wanted to kind of brainstorm with Jerry and Ken prior to the meeting to see if it was even realistic, but Janet as well. But one of the thoughts was, back when Indiana got an extension, a small team went to the HLC and shared what was happening in Indiana and asked for that extension. So I just wondered if there should be consideration as to if a small group of people should focus on the topic of, is there value to go back to the HLC to think about, or just to showcase, quite frankly, what Indiana has done in this space, any research we might have. It could be in a very, very positive light, that we share the work that is happening in our state. But it was just a thought for consideration of a small team. Ken, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Well, I think just sort of picking up on the point the Commissioner made earlier, I don't think that HLC is prepared to back off from the fundamental recommendation about a master's degree in the discipline, or a master's degree in 18 graduate hours in the discipline. But they have opened the door a bit on this tested experience idea. In contrast to teaching assistants, where they basically have said, if you're a TA no questions asked. You're okay to teach students on campus. And remember, the HLC faculty qualifications apply to all faculty and not just to dual credit teachers who are working with college faculty to provide dual credit instruction. But the idea would be that the test experience might provide more of an opening to consider things like the National Board certification, and there could be other approaches that might be used to allow more teachers to be considered qualified under that testing experience criterion. The HLC has provided very little guidance with respect to testing experience. And if you look at their guidelines, there are a couple of words in there, but there's nothing that is very extensively detailed.
And in the recommendation, I think if it happens, it should be noted that it's not something that we have to do as a state. We don't have to go back to HLC. It's simply just a consideration of should we. And based on the tested experience and national board and other items that you mentioned, Ken, it's a should we consider in non-HON is in this recommendation.
Question about that. If we can demonstrate progress in the short amount of time that we've had, do you feel like the HLC would extend that 2022 at all?
I don't think they're likely to blink right now to let us know anything like that. I mean, at the end of the time, if states were really in that situation, they might. I mean, it seems to me if we're going to go back, we need to have a basis on which we're providing something new, of which this discussion about tested experience could be if we have a template for that. The risk is they look at what we're currently using for tested experience and decide that that's not appropriate, and we've actually, in trying to. So I think we need to think about that. I think as we continue to do this work, if this group continues, if we have a pretty specific template that we go, and we're not just broadening tested experience in a way that's not really founded in practice in some way, but if we're using some specific examples and we go and we have the backup data that show exactly what that results in student success or whatever, then I think we have a basis to do that. I don't think we should do it until we have a strong basis to do that. So my recommendation would be, for what it's worth, is that we continue this idea, which I think has merit, and we explore how we could develop that into a proposal that seems significant enough that they would maybe, right now if we went, I think they would be investigating how we're currently using tested experience.
I think
Go ahead, Gail, and then.
I think it's a couple things. It's first of all, they open the door themselves, so the timing of it is very important. I think you're right. It's too soon. But whatever we would develop would be, because time is going by, would need to be rigorous, but also compressed for the applicant to be able to complete and show, because we're going to be down to probably, we're lucky, a year and a half.
And if we're doing national board certification, it takes 3 years to do.
That's
one of our
small number. I don't think we should be putting all our eggs in that basket. So to me, I agree that we would need to have something, a concrete pathway that's different than just the traditional model of trying to get students through. But it, would have to appear to be rigorous, but also something that wouldn't take long for an applicant to get done.
Yeah, I guess, well, this waiver wasn't just for Indiana. My recollection was Minnesota, for instance, was very active in pursuing as well. So I guess I think if you're going to follow up on what Katie's recommending, we probably also, it would be helpful to look at what other states are doing, to see if we can figure out how collaboratively we can come together. Because frankly, Indiana coming by ourselves, I think exposes us a lot more than if we could go with several states that have, maybe it sounds like maybe they're not working as intently as we are, but that have come together with some ideas that we can kind of collaboratively understand.
And I think that's a good point, Representative Bain. It's one of those things, being on this and seeing the recommendations we have, how might we turn over every single rock to see what is the option. So it could very well be that no other states are interested. It could very well be that it doesn't make sense for Indiana to go back. But to me, it's worth at least an exploration and a deeper dive into, is this an option? So.
No, I think that's true. I also am thinking with our institutions who are represented here, I do think that this whole concept of finding out a way, if there is a way, in an academically rigorous way, consistent with the way you give credit now, to give credit for some of this tested experience in some way. Because then we actually have people who have the credits. And so, looking at the ACE or the WGU or some of these models that are based on competency, is there some way for us to extend this to our biggest providers of this? So I think that could be a part of this whole idea, and it would be interesting to see how other states are using competency-based, and that would be a basis for us to go back to HLC too.
I believe the conversation earlier was about checking to see if we lost those with a master's degree by natural attrition, and so those numbers would be incredibly important to us. It would build the case for the numbers we have and that we turned out in the last several years versus those who retired.
Is there something ISTA can do with these numbers to help unveil some of what we're looking in terms of data? Try to outreach to administrators and, we haven't really done anything as an association to move the data along, so I'm asking.
I don't know about iState alone, but one of the things I've been looking at as well is, and of course I know that people in the room are real experts in this, so I'm a novice, but probably, Katie, I like your idea of really focusing, kind of getting kind of Indiana-centric again here in the conversation with HLC. That may also include an overlay of really what our teacher attrition beyond dual credit might look like in 2022. I mean, some of the forecasts show a cliff in 2022, and not only how many teachers, places like IU, et cetera, preparing, but how many teachers, that would next retirement cliff at the teacher rank. So I think, again, an overlay of other issues that we're fighting in connection to this, so that ISTA and the DOE together may have a really nice picture of the other economic indicators. I don't know that data well enough. So I think that's something possible.
The other data, this is not a good news story, but it's one that probably should be factored in, is by 2022 we may start to see some of this enrollment cliff that we're talking about in terms of the number of students who are actually our actual high school enrollment is expected. At this point it hasn't, but by then you're starting to anticipate it may go back up again, but I think you're going to see some. I don't think that's something to sustain a long-term policy on preparation of dual credit teachers, but I think it's a data point that we should probably be thinking about.
I have one other question. So in our institution, Dennis Grove tends to handle the HLC conversation, so I know the answer to this before I ask, but maybe it's worth asking. Has the HLC done any kind of responsible reporting back to what they're seeing as viable options? I mean, in other states, HLC site visits are happening every week in some of the 3,000 HLC institutions. Site visitors and peer reviewers are starting to see models being mentioned and described. I mean, I guess one of the things we might do is push the HLC to give us some feedback. Say, we're looking to build as many robust pathways as possible. What are you seeing that you suggest are at least starting points for us to look at? I know HLC is not created that.
We could use that. If we decide to go back, we could frame part of that. I think that their responsibility, that's not their responsibility to actually do that. But it doesn't keep us from asking. you know, we could still, in the context of we're looking for as many opportunities to go down this path as possible, and if they can help us in that regard. But other thoughts about it, not just this, but any of the recommendations? Yes.
I have one. I'll pass out to everyone. So going back to the competency-based education and prior learning assessments, I like our business administration program standard. The highlighted point, especially bullets 3 and 4, the documented evidence of teaching excellence, including data award, and also the documentation of research and publication in the field. I wonder if that might be included in that best practice E. Of course, we would need to make it rigorous. It can't just be a teacher leader that is given to anyone, but I think that that's worth exploring also.
Actually, could you spend a little more time explaining this to me?
So that's okay. This is an example. This is our business administration credentialing standard for Ivy Tech.
Okay.
So these are for business, these are for our business classes.
So you're using this sort of as a template, something to develop something like this.
So we have number 4, that's for our teachers that just have a bachelor's degree, but then they may have, they need to have 2 or more of the following. So typically we find people who have the 2 years of in-field professional employment in a business field. But then we need 1 more item. And oftentimes we have business teachers who have been published, or maybe they've received some other professional teaching excellence or something.
So, for example, the last one, documented relevant additional coursework beyond the bachelor's degree,
Right.
equivalent to 18 semester hours, or equivalent subject matter coursework, and you would give, well, what are your thoughts?
So you're talking about this as a model. So
As a possibility to add to that best practice, that maybe we don't have people who have the competency-based education or prior learning, but maybe they've been published. Maybe we have somebody who was the Wayne Township Teacher of the Year. And I heard the last meeting, you said that our teachers, they want to teach these classes and they deserve to teach these classes. And that really brought this home, I think, is that we have some excellent teachers who've been teaching these dual credit classes for a long time, and they're really, really good.
So the laundry list that you can check off and say,
Right.
I need 2 or 3 things, and that's my competency.
Would this fall under, in hiring those, your expertise would be helpful to answer this. Would this fall under tested experience? I mean, could this be a part of, to the earlier point that Ken was talking about, could this be a part of what Indiana creates for our tested experience?
Yeah, so I think, I understand, these are for the business administration.
Right, so this is just an example.
So this is under CTE, it's not a part of the liberal arts courses, but it does provide some fleshing out of what criteria would be appropriate for tested experience on the liberal arts side.
And could this work for the liberal arts?
Tested experience potential.
The feedback we got from the agency was very specific, for right or wrong. I mean, I'm not championing it, I'm just chirping it, which is that teaching excellence really isn't part of their, wasn't originally, and both times we asked, part of or teaching experience, I should say, wasn't part of what we add to the balance of whether or not a person should be accredited. I guess they weren't specific with teaching excellence, so I guess that's a question we could ask to clarify. But they were very specific, and the more we asked, the worse the answers got, I think, on teacher experience.
Well, as a part of the discussion of this group continuing to work, it might be good to have a cross-sector group, a small group of this to actually continue, if you have the willingness to work on this whole tested experience idea, competency-based, and sort of the overlap between the two, between the sectors that are represented. And then obviously we're thinking if this is an ongoing quarterly meeting, we'll be talking probably early next year, coming back and being able to do something. We can certainly work through the commission to convene that kind of a meeting. Is there some appetite to do that? Actually work on these issues. I think we're going to solve it today, but
But I have one addition to the recommendation.
Yes,
So at least
yes.
proposed addition.
yes.
I guess would be under item 2, I would add a G, which would be to explore or develop robust supervision intense to graduate instructional models. We feel very confident through our last conversation with HLC and our visit at the Bloomington campus that teachers who are enrolled in a degree-granting graduate program and supervised sufficiently by faculty connected to that program, that is an all-round into instruction in dual credit is while they're still in the program. There have been nibbles around the edges of issues of strategies like that in other states, but they've quite frankly not been connected to graduate programs that grant actual graduate degrees, and they've not been well supervised. So I don't know that we have good feedback from the HLC. I guess my point is that the HLC from feedback from the other states I don't think is relevant to what I'm proposing. I'm proposing
Could you propose some, Mike, could you propose some language for us, since we are going to be acting on this today? I
Yes.
don't want to have us interpret it in a way other than what you meant.
I mean specifically G period, developing robust and supervision intense graduate program models. It's as brief as I can make it.
Any questions from anybody on that? Any make sense?
Robust and
Supervision intense. Because I think this is something it has to be faculty supervision intense for it to be valuable, I think, to the HLC.
So in a way, Mike, it seems to me you're sort of picking up what HLC has said about teaching systems and sort of applying it to the dual credit model.
Yes, because they're very clear that those models on campus are viable.
They do.
But they're also clear about the structure of those models.
Thank you. Other thoughts about the recommendations?
I'd like to add either on number 1 or number 4. I think we should explore what other states are doing in terms, it's mostly on number 4, but again, being at the NASEP conference, I went to a couple of sessions where online courses are being used with high school kids, but faculty teaching those, but they have backbone established for that. They have procedures. Utah was the one that really had a good system, but Nebraska and Wisconsin have supposedly have good systems as well. I think we should just look at a parallel answer to the dual credit. If we can't get enough teachers through, we've got to keep dual credit going somehow, and that might be the way to do that.
Do you have some language that we could consider for today?
No, I'm making this up as I go.
That's all right.
I think you just add on to number 4, investigate other states' models.
Or do blended models and other state models that would utilize college. You know how I am. If we're going to do explore, all these should be share, recruit, utilize the parallel. Coming parallel here. Yes.
And I don't know if I have anything close to language, but back to Representative Bates' question about numbers of national board certified teachers. I don't know if we have those schools who are doing dual credit well. Like, why are they doing it well? My guess is they've made it a priority because it's not just dual credit. It's, I know for Wabash High School, we're trying to get every kid's statewide transfer education core. So I'm curious, who's doing it well? Why are they doing it? Why are we placing a priority? And then can we replicate those models? Again, I walked in and Jane was presenting, and we're going to be mentoring Logansport and Northridge. And obviously, they're going to make dual credit a priority. They're going to incentivize without the state doing that. They're just going to do it because they see it as a priority for kids. So I just wondered if it's kind of the means, like, right? The ends would be this statewide transfer of general ed, or it's what we're trying to give the kids. The dual credit is the means to that ends. So I just wondered, I don't know, Terry, if you came
Well, and that is that survey, I think.
Yeah, and Jason, you make a really important point that was kind of discussed last time. We talked about some of the K-12 folks, you and John and Tom and Alicia, thinking about who are the best practice models and why, right? And that's where take a look at this part of the recommendation on 2. It's that last paragraph, additional best practice might be identified by surveying district superintendents, specifically with related around exactly what you're saying, and providing not just a look that we might have as K-12 folks, but more extensively what is happening in the statewide. It's a really important point, but make sure that captures what you're saying.
Thanks.
We may also want to call out in the need for new, that we're not only doing this to continue dual credit instruction equitably at current levels and meet state requirements. I mean, state's requiring these schools to do 2 of each, so I mean, it's a state requirement too. At that beginning. Other thoughts on the recommendations? Yes, Gail.
A couple of things. Small items, but maybe at the top, put something in here that says, while these are numbered for purposes of discussion and identification, this is not a numerical priority, since we have all these recommendations numbered.
Yeah, but let's just asterisk and put it down at the bottom and say, these are not in priority. These are listed just something just not priority, so that it seems like one's more important.
And on the second page, when we were talking about the new next level teacher program, we're only applied to new teachers to give them an extra year to get that, an extra year of scholarship to get their master's. Is there any way we can broaden that and broaden the focus of next level teacher? I know this gets to legislative issue. But to include as a component of it, funding the dual credit gap that we have. So existing teachers going back and helping them. It's a way to get to what I talked about last meeting, which was we have a surplus, and can some of it, I did the numbers, and these are all from a fiscal standpoint, worst case scenarios, but we can clear out theoretically that whole chart except the ones farthest away from making it, that last column. With $11 million, $600 of credit. I don't know. I really don't know what higher ed charges for graduate degree credit hours anymore. But it's not a huge number in the great scheme of things, and it would be over the next 3 years. So anyway, it's just a thought. If we could just broaden or suggest that the next level teachers program include consideration of using funds for this purpose.
Can could the two of you remind us of the current criteria for next level teachers program?
I'm not even sure what next level teacher
It's
program.
next
generation. Next generation.
I wonder if that's next generation.
I don't know what that is.
It was the speaker process.
That's next generation. Yeah.
Yes, that's the right one.
I read.
We're all kind of like.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Well, I don't think it probably would fit under the concept of next generation because that was obviously created with a very specific goal. But what she's trying to get at is what can we do for current as well as new teachers? And should, yeah, right?
You have a bill here for also funding I think F, provide district financial incentives. So that's the local finding money to do this. And I guess I would like to see a component where the state offers some money to do this.
I think
It would likely get done that way.
we did talk about it this past session, obviously being in the budget session. I spoke to Brett Bain and Teresa about it multiple times and just didn't get to have the time or focus to get it across the line. I've spoken to people in appropriations as well, trying to come up with something to assist, and it just didn't happen.
No, I understand, and I know there'll likely be some suggestions this session to use some of the surplus, and whether they're met with approval or not, we'll see. But,
What about F under the best practices? I don't think it gives specific exactly, but it does provide an opening, I think, for some of what you're talking about.
well, I read that as meaning that the local would reallocate its existing resources, its district financial incentives. It may be if we just suggested the state was involved a little stronger too. I mean, I'm just trying to ensure that that's not off the table. There'll likely be a time when it won't be feasible because we're going to lose time in this thing. But for right now, I think we still have a window for the state to come in and, as I think I almost said last meeting, buy its way out of this problem. Many teachers and institutions have already stepped up to the plate and are getting the job done, and it might not even be perceived to be fair to those who have already done it, but I guess, at some point we have to recognize we still have some time to get people through if they had the little boost. And so it's just I don't mind it going in F, but I think it needs to be a little clear that it's local or state financial incentives.
So what you're offering is provide district and state financial incentives for dual credit?
Or provide district financial incentives, including through state funding for dual credit teachers to complete blah, blah, blah.
Do we, correct me if I'm wrong here, but thinking through, do we already provide that through some of what IU offers? Doesn't that come, state money goes to IUE selected IU? So I thought that half of money is already happening statewide.
Yes, definitely. I mean, so IU sell, both of us, and institutions receives both CHE and DOE grant money to focus that, which focus specifically on graduate courses for teachers. That it's not $11 million. So I'm not, so I guess my point is, yes, we've already moved some money in that direction, which has been obviously very instrumental based on the figures Terry gave us. Whether or not it solves the problem by date X, I think is kind of what we're asking, I think. Does that help, Katie? I don't know if that clears, if that answers your question or not. Just still looking at it.
And maybe it's funding to the institutions, I guess I'm starting to think it's still a little clear, but funding to the institutions to then offer it without fee.
But it seems to me, since we're not moving into a budget session right now, and that in fact we don't know exactly what we're saying, even though we think that there may be a need, that maybe this should be a part of the continuing work of our group, that if we actually, especially if we're putting out a request for additional state funding, that we do it with a really strong case that we can make, and that we not sort of, we're not going to miss an opportunity now because we're not going to get additional funding in the next session. And so it gives us the opportunity, I think, to think through with the legislative members here and with others, and I'll make a commitment that we're willing to do that.
I get it, and we're an advocacy group, so we'll do what we need to do it. And I know this body believes in this program. I get that. We'll just.
a suggestion would, from a substitute, would be the word district limits the financial incentives. If you just took out the word district and indicated that providing financial incentives, it will give you more latitude in where there's financial incentives.
I think that makes a lot of sense, then we can figure out what that means going forward.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
since, you're welcome. Since we're on that, this is a formatting thing, and I've just recently seen this, but it seems to me that with the intended audience, that the three most important recommendations are buried in two under D, E, and F, and that is test and experience, prior knowledge, and competency-based, and financial incentives. Those really are, there really are 16 recommendations here. A, B, and C could be lumped together in a recommendation in terms of utilization of teachers, but my reaction was D, E, and F should be 3, 4, and 5 because they are definitely important recommendations in this document, and they're a little bit buried.
What if we move them up to be the A, B, and C?
You could do that, but I think they deserve even more emphasis with regard to being.
Then we need to figure out how to bucket these in a different way, is what you're saying.
But 3 could be test and experience, 4 could be competency-based education, 5 could be financial incentives. It just seems to me, as I saw this, it's like best practices are lumped in there, and frankly, I think 2F may be the most important recommendation in the entire document, because incentives are always what causes people to act.
So if we were going to bucket, if we were going to have 2 would include?
I think you could put A, B, and C together in some sort of a sentence that would talk about using teachers, retired teachers, other district teachers, college faculty as teachers, but then I would separate tested experience, competency-based education, and financial incentives as full recommendations.
Well, Dave, on that point, we do have a heading under that is a heading for 5 and 6, new modified financial models.
Yeah.
We include F.
Why don't we move new or modified up earlier and maybe best, I don't know, maybe best practices. I figure it's really going to get really farther along in the document if you do that. No, that's okay. I understand.
This document is going to be seen by people, and if they read it like I read it,
they'll lose it.
You'll read the headings and you'll keep going.
Well, let's.
I mean, I can see D and E definitely are related and could be.
You could put them together.
Right. But it seems to me F is financial, and there is a place for that.
Well, I'm going to ask for trust here. Will you let us work on the reconfiguration of the document in a way that prioritizes those and they don't get lost in the middle there, and we'll figure out what that is, either by moving it up, separating it out, or doing something that you don't have to work your way through your document before you get to what some have offered as the things that probably have the most promise.
Either that or adopt a policy of not having substitutes in the future.
No. Okay, so I think those are, so other thoughts? Yes?
This is more of a future thought, and I don't know if there's anything here, but several years ago, Kale came and talked to our chief academic officers, and at that time, one of the big topics was competency-based education, and they talked about how they could put together a course for you in maybe English or history or math, working with you, and they had run the interference with HLC so that you would know that if someone passed that portfolio, passed those tests, that it would be accepted. I haven't thought it all out yet, but I'm wondering, is there a way to work on something competency-based with someone like Kale that...
Let me reach out to them. I was on the board of Kale, they've actually now been purchased by, they're a subsidiary of Strata, and so now they just have an advisory board. Learning Counts is what you're talking about, which is a program called Learning Counts. I don't think they're doing Learning Counts right now, but I think they're obviously still in this space, so I think it's definitely worth finding out how they are partnering. They're doing a lot more with the employer community, but I think they're still engaged somewhat, and so let me figure out what they're doing in lieu of Learning Counts, because that's what you're talking about right now.
And our colleges were very interested, but the amount of work that it would have taken for every single college to create its own competency-based course in different areas, and then to have to convince HLC that it was okay to give people credit for this, and, but it was, there were costs.
Yeah, well, what happened was, I think it started off and there were a few that they came in and they actually did that. Then the institutions that they were working with in Indiana said they wanted to do it on their own. And so they weren't going to, they were ready to have the handoff to the institution and not have Kale involved anymore. So the financial model became a little more fragile. But well, let me do a little check. Okay, this has been a great discussion. We're still, if there's anything else that's pressing from Alicia.
I will report back.
If not, I would entertain a motion to approve. Second. Any further discussion on the recommendations with the changes we talked about and the trust you provided to Ken and Terry to get this right? If not, I'll entertain all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I love a unanimous vote. Great. So, and now what we haven't really discussed too much today, I know you're getting out of here a half hour early, which we will, but what is the sense about perhaps, well, this group, initially when we started the Dual Credit Advisory Council, it was created by CHE and DOE together. We were not in statute. And then the legislature gave us the charge for this particular work. So we can continue and operate this way. I don't think you guys are getting any per diem anyhow, were you? I'm pretty sure there was no per diem attached to this. So it's not like so it's not a financial situation, but we wouldn't, you know, take advantage of you more than we needed to. But it seems to me that an early meeting next year, and then with the report back and some of the things that came up today, you will, in the interim, have made all the provided information to the legislature. We'll see if there's other concerns that come from the General Assembly. And then I don't even think that we necessarily need to say we'll be meeting quarterly. I think we meet the first time and then we sort of decide whether we do this on an as-need basis or whether we really do want to meet quarterly. Any thoughts about continuing to meet and the regularity with which we would do that?
I think for 2022, it's important that we come together.
Well, then let's think about having placeholders for quarterly meetings, just because if we don't do that, it gets more difficult. And we'll send something out for something in maybe late January for the next time that we would meet.
I think at that time we'll have a better idea of that meeting where you want to go with this.
And we'll know whether bills were filed during the session too. So that'd be great. Any other comments? Thank you so much. Been good work, pleasure to work with you. Look forward to continuing to do so.
Questions?